Washoe Club. Well.
This hallway back to 1862. It was built by Joseph Douglas, who was an ore broker, and that was the gentleman that men who were panning for gold would bring their gold to sell on market on their behalf. Wallpaper from 1862. It was hand painted, and sections of it actually, over the years, stained the plaster wall behind it. Headquarters for both the 2004 and 2007 investigations. They chose this room not because it had any paranormal activity associated with it, but because at the time it was one of the few rooms in the building with a completely intact floor.
Stop going macro.
Yep. Yeah, that's Richard. He's one of the resident investigators. To match the angle of the frame, and they also cut down the bottom of the window sashes, again, to match the angle there, so that when the windows were closed and the shutters were drawn in, this room would be relatively drag-free.
Wow.
Now, it's usually about this point in the tour that people begin to realize that this building is much larger than it looks from the outside.
Yeah.
This is the single largest room in the building. It's often referred to as the ballroom, although no formal dances were ever held here. This was a gentleman's club. Women were not allowed in, not even the wives of the members. When the doorway into the wine room where the rest of the group had assembled, and a few seconds later, that infrared camera caught the apparition coming into frame right about here. Now you can see its head, body, arms, legs. About the only thing missing are its feet. And it followed Nick across the room about this fast. It got to within 3 feet of the door and disappeared. What they felt in that room, a few seconds after that ghost disappeared, was an abrupt drop in temperature, and the hair on the back of their necks and their arms stood straight up on end. They didn't see anything at the time, but that's what they experienced. But when they reviewed the footage from that camera, that's when they saw the apparition for the first time and realized that that was the reaction to that ghost coming into the room with them. And now, standing up, that is how our bodies tend to react to their presence as well. In the Victorian era, this would have been referred to as a wine room. Today, it would simply be referred to as a wet bar. It stood along this wall here. This was the bar for the Washoe Club. When we began the restoration of this building 2 years ago, we took out sections of the floor to check the beams underneath, and they turned out to be in remarkably good condition given the rather rough life that this building has had. Sofas, settees, and so forth for the entertainment both of the members and any visitors that they might have here. Now, ladies, I think it's only fair to warn you that there is a ghost in this back section of the club that likes to say hello with a nice little polite to the backside. So, if that happens in the course of the tour, gentlemen, we have an out. It's not us, it's just one. If you belong to the Washoe Club, your visit began in this small ante-room here. This is the Cloak Room. You would have checked your hats, coats, firearms if you carried any. And since the rest of the club was carpeted at the time, in a 1-inch thick, handmade carpet that was imported from Great Britain, according to the newspapers, it cost them $8,000 in 1876. That would be $320,000 today. It's just a living. Well, this building has had a very rough life. Not only did it suffer the structural collapse on the south side in 1898, but the section we're standing in now was also badly damaged in 1873. One of the boarders was a gentleman by the name of Jacob Van Bocklen. Mr. Van Bocklen was an explosives merchant. According to his inventory, in the room with him, he had 6 tins of nitroglycerin, 120 pounds of dynamite, 220 pounds of blasting powder, and a pet monkey. We suspect the pet monkey might have played into what happened next. Just before midnight, June 29, 1873, the entire top of that building was torn apart by an enormous explosion that woke the entire city. And in total, there were 12 fatalities that night. Now, before we overstay our welcome, we're going to head into the forward section and leave the old man alone. The 2 rooms that we're standing in here, these 2 were the parlors for the boarding house, and this was where you would bring visitors to entertain, since Victorian rules of etiquette forbid anyone from entertaining anyone in their bedchambers. We have captured up here 2 separate EVPs that lend credence to the idea that maybe they were sneaking women up here. There is a ghost here who will flirt with men like there is no tomorrow. She's learned the names of all the male guides, and when you're walking around with your recording devices, she will come up to you and just say, "Hey Brett, hey Kevin, hey Richard, hey Scott, how you doing?" And she will kind of hang out with us. Up here on the 3rd floor, we recorded another woman's voice. This sounded to be an older woman with an Irish accent asking, "Are you here with that whore?"
Oh.
Now, if you were an experienced miner at that time anywhere else was considered well paid at all of 80 cents a day. So it was just as easy for them to afford $6.75 a week as it was for the members of the Washoe Club to afford $950 a year.
Wow. Mazerific. Wow.
Fortunately, when the collapse occurred, everyone had gone to work for the day, so the boarding areas and most of the rooms downstairs were unoccupied. What you would have heard would have started out simply as a groaning noise, followed by a grating sound as the bricks began to split and pull apart. A few seconds later, you would have started to hear the windows attempting to hold up the weight of the building as the glass would begin to shatter as those windows collapsed. This would have then been followed by a loud roar. This wall would have pulled away and fallen down into a cloud of debris, and this floor that we're on would have settled down slightly towards that collapse. And when they went to rebuild the structure, as I mentioned earlier, they were very hard pressed for funds. So they recycled as much of the rubble as they could. But they ran out of usable material before they could finish the 3rd floor, and that's why we have 3 stories on one side, 2 stories on the other. All they did was patch up this wall, and you can see that it was a bit of a rush job from the brickwork here. They were using fragments of brick, additional mortar. They filled in this entire section. They didn't even have enough of a brick to fit that hole. Anything and everything they could do to get the building back into operation, that's what they did. I like to call this the Playroom because some of our ghosts can get pretty creative. And we like to play with them and they will reciprocate. What we'll do on occasion, we'll gather up chairs, we'll set them up in a circle in the middle of the room, and then wait to see if anyone plays with it through the course of the day. I've seen these chairs go from a circle to a half circle as if they've been opened up for conversation.
Wow.
I've seen them start out from a circle to each corner of the room, and sometimes they'll scatter throughout the 3rd floor by the end of the day. The other reason I call this the Playroom is with the door here with the 12 on it, this was one of the things they used to communicate with us. Ever since our tours began, this door has been heard to slam very, very loud. And we suspect that might be the old man trying to run people off the 3rd floor. If you take a look at the bottom here, you can see where recently a stress fracture has begun to develop from the amount of force being applied to this door when it's closed. The Douglas building became an apartment through and through. These 2 rooms were converted into the bathrooms for the entire building. So you got to know your neighbors very well when you had only these 2 bathrooms to share with all of the apartments around it. In this room here, the room behind me, and on the staircase we just came down, the Shadowman is often experienced. He's described simply as a tall individual with a high-peaked hat in what is either described as a frock coat or a long trench coat with no other visible features. He is either standing in the corners watching people as they go around, and the other time you see him, he's just moving very, very fast between doors, downstairs, or along hallways. In this room here, those adventures had their run-in with it. Zach and Aaron were doing an EVP session here in the corner. They had a night vision camera with them, and they were aiming down this hallway on occasion because they kept hearing sounds down there. Well, every time they put their camera down that way, they saw a shadow that was moving progressively closer and closer to them. Eventually, it was in the landing here. The next thing they knew, it was in the room with them. Now, the Blue Lady, or Lena, as she's sometimes referred to, has been talked about in this building as far back as the 1890s. We don't know who she is or how she came to be here. And whatever happened to her, if it happened before 1875, then all record of it probably burned up with the town. Now from here, we're going to go down this hallway to my right to the crypt wall. The wall along this side, the plaster has long since fallen away, and you can now look down into the spring cellar for this building. Embalmed bodies would be stored in the spring cellar here temporarily until there was a long enough thaw between storms that the dead could be properly laid to rest. We suspect some of the activity in this part of the building stems from the fact that these people may be confused at having been removed from what they thought of as their final resting place. And the joke among some of the guides is that if some of these were miners and they realized they'd been buried in a bar, they thought that was such a good idea they saw no reason to leave. From here, we're going to reacquaint ourselves with daylight. To visitors, when the building first opened in 1862. We'd also like to do a proper archaeological survey of this area in an attempt to find the outhouse for the building. 1910, 1915 or so when the first indoor plumbing went in. We're now going to go down.
Oh, that's a human.
Until we run out of down.
I think.
This also concludes the formal portion of the tour. Now for the brave among you, through this door to my right, that is the entrance to the spring cellar, now affectionately known as the crypt. The door on the right is a little sticky sometimes, but it will come open with a slight tug.
If you're here, can you please tell me your name? Can you tell me my name? Oh, that was me. That was right. You just said my name. Thank you. What's your name, though? Do you see the dog in here?
He sees you.
Is there anybody here with us right now? If so, can you tell me your name, please? We'd love to hear from you. Gold? Did you say gold? Something is touching me right now. Is that you? And if so, what is your name so you can... My name is Pat. Gold. Did you find gold? Were you one of the miners? Are you still looking for your gold that you sold? Now, is that gold or cold? Are you cold? there anything you'd like to tell us? I didn't catch that. Can you say that again? Well, I want to thank you for your time. Ooh. Feel that? Feel that breeze? Is that you walking by me right now? Well, thank you very much for walking by. And you have yourself a good night, or a good day. Goodbye. Gold again.